speaking of going overboard,
That was beautiful.
indeed, sometimes psychopaths throw people overboard on ships. So Psycho is our next movie, from 1960. I'm guessing if you haven't seen the original, you may have at some point seen the remake, in which a secretary steals some money. It's like a spoil the moment type thing. Steals some money from an employer's client, takes a chance, wants to sort of make a life of her own, and then she sort of runs off. Eventually gets to like a seedy motel. It's not necessarily seedy. It's just in a unpopulated area, but run by a guy named Norman Bates, and things begin to happen. Now, obviously, this is one of those movies in which I can't imagine there's a large population of people who don't know. I guess probably two of the basic things about the movie, such as the fate of Janet Leigh's character, and also the conclusion to the movie. But if you haven't seen this movie before and you already know the things, it's still an interesting movie to watch, just to see how they do it. Because I think after the famous shower scene, the movie feels a bit sluggish. Might not be the right word, but it feels a bit procedural. And it's not quite A+ material. But overall, I think it's obviously a pretty decent movie, and it's definitely a very well done suspenseful movie. I'm pretty curious. What have you seen this one before? Often, I don't really know what your history with this one is.
Yeah, I've seen this one quite a few times actually, and quite a long time ago when I first saw it. And as you know, I'm not a huge fan of movies from before the 70s, so I typically have a tough time watching anything this old. But Psycho is one of those movies that sort of a rare exception, and I think for a number of different reasons. Because other movies around this time, I think a couple of things. One is the music. Now, obviously, Psycho has a really iconic theme music, but I also feel like it's just like an extra level above any other movie around that time, which always seemed to play very similar. Like, I could watch 10 different movies from the 50s or early 60s, and the music would just always sound exactly the same to me. But I don't know, Psycho, it stands out in that regard. But I also think, even though the movie doesn't contain a lot of violence, the couple of scenes of violence in the movie is like something more than I've seen in other movies from its time. Especially for us, like, you could say this is one of the first slasher movies ever made, so, you know, it's got that advantage as well over other movies from its time. Now, just out of curiosity, I believe it might have been after the last show we did, or I mentioned to you that there was like a new uncut version of this that had come out, which in fact it's the uncut version is the version that was played in theaters in the 60s, and apparently little bits and pieces were removed for when it was actually, you know, played on TV and all the home video releases and all of that. Did you happen to watch the uncut version?
I unfortunately did not.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you right now, that is the version to watch.
I do wonder the changes are significant, because I honestly don't know much about what was either added or taken out.
To me, it was enough to change my rating by 1 point. At least based on what I remember from my previous viewings of the movie. Now, there's not a whole lot different, but it's just like little additions, and three specific additions that I can recall. One is the peephole scene, which goes a little bit longer. I believe you get to see Janet Leigh pretty much remove her entire bra for that scene. Whereas the other version, you see her start to take it off, but she doesn't quite take it off. Like, you still don't see titties or anything, so I'm not saying that, but she does completely take it off in this version. The other two parts that I recognize, which I think were the best inclusions, one is there's a scene where Norman's got like blood on his hands and he's looking at it. That's extended and you see a lot more of that. And I don't know, for some reason that helped make that scene a lot better. Just seeing a little more, blood being shown, it just kind of made a difference to me. Also helped realize the extremity of, what Norman had just done when he, spoiler alert, kills her in the shower. And the other part that I can recall was the private investigator who gets, he goes up the stairs and gets attacked by Norman, or Norman's mother, however you want to look at it. And he's falling down the stairs. Now, I can't recall what you see after that in the version that everyone else has been watching, but in this one, there's a lot more, a lot more stabbings. You see the knife going up and down a lot more times, and for a movie like this, that meant a whole lot more to me, because, like I said, the violence and, there's not a whole lot of it in the grand scheme of things when you compare it to movies from 80s, 90s, whatever. So those inclusions definitely helped make the movie feel more violent. Yeah, especially for its time period.
I'm wondering, do you know approximately how much time it quote-unquote adds on to it?
I think a little over 1 minute.
Beautiful.
Yeah, or roughly around that. But, like, outside of the uncut stuff, I will say that the movie, I felt, like, because it's been a while since I last saw this, and I did think that some of the earlier scenes in the movie were quite suspenseful as well. Like the scene where the boss sees her driving around in the car.
Yeah,
like,
that's
shit.
I think it's a fantastic scene that Dad would take, like, and the music starting up. It's a fantastic scene.
And also the cop that is kind of stalking her after he pulls her over and, follows her to the car dealership and is just watching from across the road. That was really good too.
I always liked her initial conversation. I mean, am I acting like I'm doing anything wrong? Well, to be honest, yeah, you are. Like she was the worst liar I've ever seen. Like, that was just awkward to watch.
Yeah, yeah, I would have felt the same way. Now, there are some things about the movie that I don't particularly like, which I've never been a huge fan of, like, internal monologue type stuff. There's quite a few scenes, she's driving in the car, you can hear her thoughts and what people are supposedly saying about the situation. Then you got Norman who's doing the same thing, and I don't know, there's a part of me that feels like it's explaining things or giving us information that we don't need to necessarily have.
Well, what I like about, at least with Marion Crane's dialogue, internal dialogue, she's worried about, that one guy, for instance, being like super angry with her. And I'm not saying the guy wasn't angry, but we later find out that as long as the guy gets a money back, he's not even going to, like, at least according to what that private detective said, he wasn't even going to really go after her legally, which he probably couldn't have since that wasn't apparently declared income. But I don't know, I do think it sort of increases the paranoia that she personally feels, which even gives it more reason to keep going forward with the somewhat ill-advised action she took.
Yeah. And when she took off with the 40,000, I immediately had to get on Google and search the inflation rates, because I was like, how much money is 40k worth back in the early 60s? And I had a look, and it's roughly about 350,000 US dollars, which, okay, yeah, it's a pretty big amount. I'm not quite sure if it's big enough to go off to a private island and live the rest of your life, but yeah, it's a significant amount, I guess.
Yeah, if I had $325,000, I would be happy.
That might help me get through about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years.
Hey, I might be able to go to the doctor and, actually be able to pay, so that might be fun.
Yeah.
American healthcare system, guys, let's do it.
That's pretty atrocious, actually, the American healthcare system. Because I was watching a video recently, like I was just watching on YouTube this basketball video of this guy who hit his head on something, and the first thought of someone was to call 911, and he's like, no, 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 you know. Just drinking some orange juice in the ambulance costs you $1,000, but I mean that's so sad. I mean, in Australia, if you feel like you need to call an ambulance, you can call one and really not be charged for it. So
Yeah, so I can imagine that $350,000 would probably go a longer way for you folks than it might for the average American, at least in the current system.
yeah. So yeah, it's pretty sad that you have to be like, well, don't ever get sick, don't ever get hurt. You can't afford it.
Yeah, so it's a fun time. I also wanted to point out that some people don't necessarily like the conclusion to this movie. Some people say it might over-explain some things. I'll be honest. I think it's a perfectly okay conclusion. I mean, I'm suspecting most of the people, watching nowadays, they already knew the plot twist anyway, so they didn't necessarily need the information. But I do sort of like how it ends in like a clinical note, like, hey, this is exactly what's going on and why it's going on. So I don't know. It never bothered me, but I do know that ending isn't necessarily to everyone's tastes.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it bothered me, but I did pick up on that. Like maybe it was just, sometimes we blast movies for just kind of having someone tell you everything that's happening in the movie, or all the details, and that kind of happens towards the end of this, where he did it because of this, and is he a transvestite? No, they do kind of tie everything up in a neat little bow in this one conversation, which like I said, it didn't bother me, but at the same time, I did pick up on how that could be seen as like being over-explained. Like I said, the inner monologue type stuff, like with Norman at the end, where he's got his mum's voice talking, and that doesn't do a whole lot for me. Like I still find the more frightening scenes in the movie to be just, the actual murder scenes, and yeah, the psychological aspect of it doesn't really do all that much for me. But overall, I still enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, what I enjoy, at least toward the second half of the movie, is like the investigation. They see the old woman sitting in a chair when they were to, a private investigator wants to talk to her, and everybody wants to talk to her. I mean, they concoct the whole plan at the end. Hey, you distract Norman, I'll go up and talk to the woman. And I think it sets up, because like I said, even if you know what's coming, I think it sets up a pretty quality suspense. And of course that final scene in which it's revealed that somebody is somebody. I think it's a scene when she turns that chair around and then gets attacked. I think that's a fantastic scene. And again, the very ending with Norman just in the I'm assuming that's some type of police room and interview room, but just asking for the blanket, and that in the monologue right there, I actually think is pretty good. Would they even hurt the fly? It's just, and that smile, it's just fantastic.
One bit of trivia here that I might get blasted for, but to be honest, I'd never heard of it before, and I only realized it when I IMDb'd the actress, Janet Leigh. I had no idea that she is Jamie Lee Curtis's mum.
Yeah, yeah, I know it's interesting.
It's one of those things that you think everyone probably know. Like, it's one of those pieces of trivia, because Psycho's this major classic movie. Jamie Lee Curtis is in Halloween, big horror movie classic again. I had never heard anyone actually say it.
Yeah, I think part of it might be, and this is, so just before I say this, I want to clarify that I know a decent amount about horror movies from the pre-60s, but I don't know much about other movies. But I don't know if Janet Leigh is like I don't know any other movie she's been in. It's not a name I know aside from Psycho. Apparently she was a big actress, but I don't know her. And aside from I'm guessing if you ask like people, 80 out of 90 are going to say Psycho is the only movie they know her from. And that might be partially why when it comes to Jamie Lee Curtis, not everybody makes that connection.
Well, I did notice that both of them, both Janet Leigh and Jamie Lee Curtis, are both in The Fog, but that's a movie that I haven't really watched a whole lot of, so I don't really recall.
I'll be honest. I actually, I forgot Janet Leigh was in The Fog, and I think The Fog's a fantastic movie. So, I feel ashamed right now.
I'm gonna have to remove your license to watch horror. Yeah.
I pretty much lost it with the fact that there's so many movies I hate that other people enjoy. So
your horror fan card has been removed.
I just
I didn't even know.
Well, Psycho's a good movie. It's a quality suspenseful movie. Of course, it's directed by Hitchcock. I honestly haven't seen a whole lot of Hitchcock movies. That's one of the things I sort of been wanting to do, but since I only consider like maybe 3 of them horror, or actually maybe 4 of them horror, I pretty much seen those and ignored everything else. But fantastic movie, not my favorite Hitchcock movie. I actually enjoyed The Boards more than Psycho, which if you had asked me like 3 weeks ago, I would have thought was impossible, but it's true. So sorry guys, but it's still a pretty good movie. And I would give this an 8.5. And I think I had to consider this. I think I would round that down to an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. So my rating for this one is a 7, and I even considered maybe even going up to an 8. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Now I know some people are going to see that 7 and go, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And let me just say that for a movie from before the 70s to get a 7 from me, much like the inflation with the 40k being 350k, that almost translates to about a 9 or a 10 out of 10 type movie. Because I literally cannot think of a single movie from the 60s that I would ever rate a 7 or an 8 out of 10 outside of Psycho that I've seen so far.
It's just amazing.
So, it's just the movies from the 60s and before that, they just don't do it for me.
On a exciting side note, nice comparison, just earlier today I watched a movie from 1928, so... different strokes for different folks.
To me, it's like, I don't know if this is the best analogy, but it's just one that pops up in my head. It's kind of like, when people started using PCs and they got Windows 95. Oh my god, this is fucking amazing. And for the time, it's fucking amazing. But now, compare that to having a PC now, with whatever, Windows XP, Windows 10, whatever. The first time you use it, probably not as exciting because, we've had PCs and we know they get slightly better and better and better over time. And, I kind of feel that same way with how people react to movies. Like, I can understand why people would say Psycho is a classic. They give it a 9 or a 10 out of 10. And, when you first use Windows 95, you're like, oh my god, this is fucking amazing. But I don't compare movies or review movies that way. Like, I'm reviewing Windows 95 as if I'm using it right now. So, which, ain't as great as what we got now. And that's not to say new movies from 2010 are better than movies from 1980. That's not what I'm saying, but I think there's certain limitations that movies back in the 60s had that movies, once we got color and certain effects and things like that, which certainly made it a lot easier to enjoy movies from, the 70s, 80s, and so forth. So anyways, like I said, probably not a great analogy, but it's one that kind of popped up in my head.
I was just going to say how to disagree and just move on with life.